So for those of you who have been to the previous webinars, we've heard from some people about the different sorts of models of support which exist already for new entrants going into land-based businesses. And I'm going to give you an overview of some of the business support programs which are operating in other sectors. And really, this is looking to develop some fresh thinking around how we can increase innovation, which is going to be essential to help develop resilient business models, which are going to thrive in a new economic and policy environment. So some of the key questions that I've been thinking about when I did this research is how can we reach a diversity of applicants into the new entrant support scheme? How can we encourage innovation? What kind of business advice and mentoring support do new entrants need to thrive? And how does this link into the wider agri-food system? So as part of the co-design process, we're investigating how incubator or startup hubs might provide access to innovation or mentoring support for new entrants. And this is hopefully going to help feed into the design of any kind of support and innovation hub. So types of business incubation model, you can see here that incubation is an umbrella term really for lots of different types of support practices. And they include accelerators, incubators, co-working spaces, university enterprise zones, startup weekends, hackathons, and it's very common to have hybrid models which incorporate different aspects of some or many of these different programs. Overall, the idea of business incubation is to support startups through the early and fragile stages of growth, and around 20 to 30 million pounds of public funding is spent on UK incubators and accelerators each year. So there are well-established means of providing startup support across different sectors. So I'll be drawing on some research carried out by Nesta for Bayes in 2019, which looked at the impact of business accelerators and incubators in the UK. But to bring that to life a bit more, I'll also use some examples from different incubation programs I've looked at over the past couple of months. So I've spoken to the Prince's Trust, who had their flagship support program for young people called the Enterprise Program. That's been going since the 1970s, and it offers business support to young people. I've also spoken to Cambridge Social Ventures, who are a social venture incubator in the east of England. The EIT Food Seedbed Incubator, if I can get my words out. That's established by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, and it's a program which is delivered by top food partner universities and also research and innovation organisations, so something a bit different there. And then finally, I also spoke to the UEZ Fund programme, which is funded by Research England and delivered by the University of Lincoln's National Centre for Food Manufacturing. Okay, so here is an overview of what the typical business incubation process looks like. This is quite generic, as I mentioned, hybrid models are very common, but in general, incubation programs start with a pre-incubation period. And this is the point at which the target market are introduced to the incubation offering. And this is often through a free introductory session or a weekend. And it's a sort of pre-start stage which introduces the idea of the incubation program, expectations, format, etc. This varies by program, but as an example, Cambridge Social Ventures run a so-called social venture weekend. It's a pre-start stage introduction to the social venture sector, and it's very inclusive. There are no prerequisites for attendees. It's suitable for emerging and established social entrepreneurs, and there's no assessment at this stage. It's more about encouragement and support. And after the pre-start stage, people can then apply to be enrolled in the full incubation process if they like what they see and if they think it's suitable for them. After meeting entry criteria for the incubation program, you can put your application forward, and the selection process may vary from being very rigorous, multi-stage process, applications, interviews, testing, to more of a simple single stage process if it's more of an inclusive program. The selection processes vary according to the business model of the program. So if you have an investor-led program, they tend to favour businesses that will become an attractive investment proposition in the future. So they are looking for organisations which have the potential for rapid growth, for example, whereas programs with more of a social impact focus might look to take on candidates who have the ability to create change on a large scale. So that's more important than rapid growth potential for them. So that's how the sort of selection criteria might vary depending on the business model. But broadly, criteria used include initial traction in the market, profit potential, potential to scale the business, differentiated technology, that sort of thing. That's what incubators, incubation programs are looking for in their applicants. And something else to note is clients can be resident or non-resident or affiliated to an incubation program. So at the bottom here, you see this offering of physical space, so lab space or office space. That is less common actually now since the pandemic, where lots of these programs have moved online. But prior to that, there may have been an offering of physical space to applicants, so they have a sort of hub in which they can work. And then running throughout the incubation process, there is usually access to various networks for learning and building contacts going forwards. The actual incubation process itself is tailored to the requirements of the target market. So generally, there will be aspects of training, business advice, financial support, technology support, and these can be delivered as sort of workshops, courses, one-to-one mentoring. There's a whole host of different interventions, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Moving on, after the incubation period itself, there may or may not be exit criteria. So the organisation might stipulate that the business has to leave the incubation programme after a certain number of months, or when it has grown to a certain size, or when they feel that the programme is no longer offering the organisation any sort of further added value. And then as a graduate of an incubation program, you may or may not be offered aftercare, a sort of alumni package. Again, that varies. So you can see here an overview of the types of business models which are used by startup support programs. The sector focus aspect is interesting. There's evidence to suggest that incubation that focuses on a particular industry or sector are more effective than those with a so-called horizontal focus, which are more generic. So that's interesting to note. They vary in terms of the point of intervention. So whether they take on businesses at the pre-startup stage or a later stage venture. They vary in their funding model and also their income generation. So we can define the income generation as to whether they are sort of growth driven, so whether they're looking for that rapid growth in their applicants and the businesses they're supporting. Typically, those incubation programs will offer upfront funding in exchange for equity. They may have a fee-driven model whereby they charge rent or fees to businesses to join the incubation program, or they might be an independent model, so they're not reliant on income from the organizations themselves. They may be publicly funded or seek revenue from sponsors or events. And then The program package is infinitely variable, as I've mentioned. There could be standardized curriculum or training. There could be co-location in a shared office space, alumni support, etc. There really are infinite variations of this, and it depends on the needs of the users. So a deeper look then at two different types of incubation program, which you may have heard of. The accelerator model is typically a fixed term of very intense support, and usually it's time limited, so between 3 and 6 months. They typically have a very high selection criteria which they're looking to meet, and they tend to take in cohorts of businesses with a periodic graduation every sort of 6 months, and they tend to have a sort of investment model where they offer upfront funding or investment in exchange for equity. On the other side, we have incubators, which usually provide tactical support less intensively, but over longer periods of time than accelerators. So they tend to be open-ended in duration. So when you graduate or exit the incubator, this is usually based on the stage of the company rather than a specific time frame. Typically, they're much less selective. They've got ad hoc admissions, and they're quite often rent or fee based. So you'll pay a fee for joining the program, or you'll pay rent to use facilities such as shared office or lab space. The types of support offered by incubation programs varies enormously. So business support and coaching are central to most programs. But the specific interventions needed will vary dependent on the desired outcomes of the program itself. So business skills development might be in the form of drop-in sessions or compulsory courses. They may be more reliant on mentoring one-to-one, or it might be that if you're in a shared office space environment, peer-to-peer networking is used as a sort of central part of the program. The Bayes report that looked into incubators and accelerators in the UK found that mentoring support is offered in 89% of programs, and typically startups receive up to 2 hours of mentoring per week. And interestingly, the most important attribute for a mentor is that they are expert in their industry rather than being necessarily an entrepreneur or a sort of an innovation expert themselves. So that industry expertise is what's really valuable. It's also been found that different services might be sought depending on prior entrepreneurial experience. So if an individual lacks startup experience, they're more likely to look for functional skills support, so IT, legal and government regulations, market understanding, that sort of thing. But individuals with startup experience are likely to look for strategic information, so market and opportunities, PR, related R&D activity. So that's interesting in terms of how you design the sort of menu of support of any program to be as inclusive as possible and to try and reach a diversity of applicants. So when a business moves on from an incubator or an accelerator, it's said to have graduated. And for resident incubators, so for incubators where office space is provided and you're a resident there, the average time a single business stays is around 2 years, but around 10 years of incubation might be needed in some sectors where regulatory approvals or trials or patents are needed to be secured. So there's a big variety in the level of length of stay. The average length of stay in a virtual incubator, so no office space provided, is 18 months. Some programs offer staged progression or gateways. So you can see on the slide here that on the right-hand side, Cambridge Social Ventures, their incubation program offers 6 months of core support plus a further 12 months of flexible support, which is negotiated with each business. So up to 18 months in total. Whereas the Food Seedbed Incubator is a 6-month fixed term specialist program, although they do offer alumni options, so you can bid for funding and have access to networks after that 6 months. And the Prince's Trust offers a 12-month package initially with up to 3 years of one-to-one mentoring if needed, again, tailored to the individual. So the options are infinite again, but it's worth noting that length of stay is weakly associated with improved firm outcomes. So there's no guarantee if you stay for longer that you will be destined to succeed. So that's worth noting as well. In terms of the design of how programs look, the evidence around the impact of support measures is fairly mixed. So most types of support offered by incubators are positively associated with at least one outcome measure, but few interventions can be linked positively with multiple outcomes. So that means really that most support measures are sort of effective, but there's not really a dream design in terms of the sort of menu of support you're offering. There is some evidence that measures such as access to peers, help with team formation, press or media exposure, industry expert mentoring, and direct funding from the programme are helpful. And there's also moderately strong evidence that providing networking opportunities is important, although the effect of that may be stronger for firms operating in a very competitive business environment. Interestingly, there's not a lot of value added by providing workspace. So there is potentially an argument for doing something virtual. And as I mentioned earlier, evidence suggests that specialization of a program is preferable to generic incubation. Finally, there is some quite reasonable evidence that university involvement improves outcomes, and institutional affiliation and professional staff support seem more useful than individual academics. So read into that what you will. Okay, moving on. A quick nod to evaluation of any business incubator impact, because I think this is quite interesting to note. So graduating from an incubator program is not in itself an indicator of success, because selective programs might pick the most able candidates who are more likely to succeed in spite of incubation support. So we can't really use business success rates alone as a success metric for a program. So the major challenge in conducting research into the impact of incubation is that there's rarely a single measure of success, and many programs are unclear whether their main motivation is to improve business survival, create jobs, create wealth. So one way of looking at evaluating impact is to look at both hard and soft measures. So this slide here just demonstrates the sort of hard measures at the top and then the softer measures underneath. And this acknowledges that the sort of range of impacts associated with business incubation and the fact that these impacts and their measurement change over the course of the incubation process. So just something to think about in terms of the sort of skills that we would want to be sort of encouraging in applicants, and how we would want those to be demonstrated throughout the course of the programme. Finally, just some lessons learned for policy really from all of this, all of these findings. Most importantly, it's necessary to consider any startup journey as an entire value chain, and that requires support at each individual point. And the ecosystem in which the incubation program sits needs to support the activities and the business models that new starters adopt. So because of this, a long-term approach is needed. And that way we can ensure that the establishment and the sustainability of the incubation industry sort of properly functions in the business environment where the incubators operate. So it's that those wider system links that we're trying to build. The involvement and the support of stakeholders is also vital to incubator success. Partner networks will be contributing to incubator successes, and this typically includes universities, industrial contacts, financial institutions, professional service providers, etc. And the incubator needs to be recognised as a centre of expertise within these networks, and there need to be clearly defined mechanisms to ensure that clients are in contact with key stakeholders and in important networks. So that network building again is crucial. So overall, there is no, although there's evidence of good practice, there's no single template for a business incubation, and the actual service mix should reflect the needs of the clients for the specific objectives of the incubator. And it may be that the best fit is a single program, 2 differentiated programs, or perhaps a menu of different types of support which businesses can choose from. And then finally, publicly reported data on startup outcomes is needed to kind of further inform research on impacts and effectiveness. So I think that's all I've got to say, really. This is just some questions which I've been thinking about when I put this presentation together, and hopefully they might spark some thinking from yourselves as to how we can sort of intervene and best support new starters and what any incubation program might look like. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emma. Go for it, David. What would you like to ask?
Somebody's got to go first. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Emma. Great presentation. I was just going to ask, how many agri incubators are there already exist in the UK at the moment? The one, I'm in Gloucestershire, and the one that I can think of is Farm 491, which you may have come across, which is obviously associated with the RAU at Cirencester. So I just wondered if that's a one-off, or there's lots all spread around the country, or in one certain part of the country. So yeah, that's just what I was going to start with. And the other little question I had was, your presentation mentions obviously a 10-year approach for long-term success, and yeah, I completely agree. Obviously, new entrants is obviously a long-term challenge, isn't it, to get new people into the industry. Obviously, it's obviously down to funding, I guess. Do you think Defra will be willing to fund a program for 10 years? That was the two challenges I had for you. I hope that's all right.
Well, I might just, before I let Emma on, your second question obviously is all up for grabs, and the ultimate decision maker is probably not Defra. Well, it's Treasury and so on. And actually, financial planning in general, unfortunately, in government does not go that far. So that's can't really sort of, unfortunately sort of say. But obviously things do go on for periods if evaluations suggest they're providing benefits and there's ongoing decisions for further funding. But Emma, your first question.
Well, yes, you're right. There aren't that many agri-space sort of innovation incubators. I was looking specifically at incubators outside of this, the agri-space, and actually the Bayes support report was looking more at the sort of tech and digital side of things. So the sort of agri requirements are likely to be quite different. So I think we need to be sort of careful about sort of transferring some of the findings across to the sort of agri space that we're looking to support. But really, I think that there are lots of people that are offering this type of business support, and a lot of it is likely to be transferable across to new starters, because whether they're in land-based businesses or whether they're not in a land-based business, because the sort of the business skills that we're looking to foster are transferable across sectors. So I think it's a matter of building the networks and drawing on existing support providers and building linkages, so we can try and sort of not reinvent the wheel, but draw on existing people that are already offering this, but link them all together to make it more comprehensive and give a better geographical spread.
And David, you could say that council farms, to some extent, some of them are effectively incubators, and in horticulture there are a range of new start farms and so forth. So there are obviously on a range of people doing this. The question is, what extent do they do? How much funding do they have? Could they be doing other things, and so on? Sarah.
Thanks, Henry, and thanks, Emma. That was very interesting. I've just jotted down a few words: funding, communications, and the menu, which struck me. The importance of funding to make possibly a generic system work. Organisations helping to communicate so that it's quite a diverse offer, and I really liked the idea of a menu, so that you could fit your business to the service rather than a service fitting a business. It seems to make sense, and I think that ties in with the transferable skills and generic service. But it was quite comforting to hear the amount of money that's spent, because I think that's the whole crux of the matter: to make something work, almost put something into a pot to make it good and let everybody feed in and choose what they need, rather than piecemeal to other smaller services that might not then last the course. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. I think, yeah, incubators, accelerators, business support, that the programs are well established, and they emerged in the tech and the digital side of things, but actually they are now integrating sectors really widely, and there is a lot of money going into them. And I think it's just a matter of designing something which is going to be inclusive enough to get to cater for people who have different ideas, and offering, well, yes, a menu, offering a fundamental skills which will help build resilience and sustainable business models, which those are fundamental skills across whatever business you're looking to start up, but also perhaps signposting to more specialist or technical skills as and when needed. So absolutely, we need to design something which is going to hopefully get a diversity of applicants in, so we can try and support as wide a range of land-based businesses as possible.
Thank you. That sounds
sort
good.
of quite interesting, Sarah, isn't it? This question of the geographical scope of different things, because we're our current sort of edition is that at the moment there are about 40 people, 40 new people going into council farms, and about 30 into sort of other support providers, and some of the things we talk about, locality, like networking, relationships with probably land matching, a range of things that where being local, reasonably local, probably matters. Then the question, if you're doing a sort of training course, well, does that, that doesn't, on the face of it, need to be local, and if you've only got 70 in all, or a couple of hundred, and you're tailoring, so say only 20 people want it, that seems to lend to something that's a bit more national. Then the question is, if the funding, do you put the funding streams in at the local level, and the local level subcontract effectively to various national providers on different things, or do you put money into national providers? There's quite a lot of tricky elements there. I don't know if, Sarah, you had any thoughts on that?
I think it's quite interesting if you use a model so that local can tap into something that's approved and generic and transferable. I would imagine there's every possibility that you can tailor a service that's an approved service and that works to a specific, whether it's a sector, whether it's an organisation, whether it's somebody in business. You could either do it independently or you could do it for a group. I think there are many ways of using something that's a central hub. Without, this is just a sort of concept of use. I think some people really like having somebody to help them through a learning process. Some people are happy to do that by themselves. I think it often works if you can have other people as part of that process, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a network of recipients. So I think there are many strands to make a sort of centralised, well-funded, well-run offer work. And perhaps the idea is not to be too prescriptive so that every avenue can be explored. But I think that the main point is to make sure that whatever it is will run and is funded and has longevity and all the right components. And then the use of it is probably, how it's used might be the secondary consideration. I don't know if other people have ideas as to how they might like to access a system that helps them either improve, progress their business.
Christine.
Yeah, thanks very much for that presentation. And all those skills that have been mentioned are absolutely where we should be in the mentoring. I think localized sort of facilitation is good. I think this last year has proved with myself in the role of a trainer, anything virtual, you just do not get that same interaction. And I think part of this transfer of knowledge and mentoring does come on groups getting together. You know, we always say that there's more sort of learning and information being swapped over coffee times and lunch times, you know, rather than virtual. So a localized thing is really, I would say, preferable. Can I just ask, from what of the other agri incubators, from what sort of base have they grown? Because as we all know, at the end of the day, it takes a lot of finance to get new entrants into the industry and get themselves set up anyway. So from you mentioned council farms, Henry. Would this be something that would be run in conjunction with the estate owners as a different model to share farming and things like that? And it's just interesting to know how the other incubators from where they have grown in the first instance.
Well, let's just there's basically council farms which are sort of vary in terms of, I mean, the basic stripped down council farm is just people apply for a bit of land based on a business case, and they, you know, it's almost sort of not that different from just any old tenancy situation, except you have to be a new entrant. To, I think some council farms are much more, you know, extensive in terms of providing training, reaching out further for more diverse people, all these sorts of things. So there's quite a this is from the surveys that we've been doing. Then there are other user support people who are not council farms, but people like the ecological land cooperative who actually get the land as well. But then there are others that just provide in horticulture. A lot of these are in horticulture and training people and have plots of land for people to learn how to grow vegetables and so on, and lead to market gardening and things like that. So in terms of that, the council farms have been in decline. You know, the size of council farms have about halved over the last 40 years because the land has been sold off by local authorities. But there's been a growth, I think, in non-council farm centres, and there's a, you know, I don't know if there's anyone here, and of course, actually, Graham knows a bit about this, don't you? But council farms, but I suppose we're trying to think more systemically about it and what funding we can provide, and also how we can think about how these incubators fit into the whole pipeline of, you know, starting from scratch and ending up progressing to a sort of independent business. And hence we are talking to landowners as well about what commitment they might make to even up the playing field, if you like, for new entrants, rather than just going for the same old, just immediately going to their current tenants and suggesting that they expand their holdings. So there's that conversation going on as well. And also thinking maybe now how we can, those people who feel stuck in council farms and want to expand, how we can help them sort of from the other end, if you type. And actually, it's interesting, Emma was talking about the difference between accelerators and incubators. And, you know, maybe we need an accelerator program for people who've been in council farms for a long time to get them out of council farms into, you know, other forms of tenancy to allow more people in the other end, if you like. But that's, you know, all of these things are in play in terms of thinking about how this might all work better.
Yeah, I know in our particular area in Yorkshire, you know, the National Trust have encouraged new entrants and helped them along the way as well. So I think it's the big landowners are fine, but it is, as you say, it is very, very easy for, I know our local estate where tenant farmers here, it's so easy for them just to go to an existing tenant, you know, and that's the problem. The incubation, the program and everything sounds absolutely fantastic, but it just doesn't get around that essential first thing, isn't it, about getting them onto those farms in the first place. So it's just, yeah, it's all about talking to all the various landowners, isn't it, and get their involvement in it as well.
Absolutely. Oscar, welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Just to pick up on one of your points, Henry, if from a private landowner's point of view, they go to an existing tenant because it's a lower risk, because they know how that tenant works and they've got a good working relationship, can we, through policy, make it attractive to that existing tenant to be a mentor? So then the landowner has some trust because the new tenant would come in onto the piece of land, but is mentored by the existing tenant. So the landowner would maintain some trust. You're bringing someone in, and then that mentor could be used as the local part of the project. So training could be offered virtually, potentially, from a central base, but then your mentors provide the local aspect. So you don't need a local team. The mentors are the people on the ground providing the local aspect. They gain the trust of the landowner, and more private landowners are potentially interested.
Well, it may be the case, obviously, that mentors are local and so forth. I'm still not sure if you could rely on them to be the, you know, because if you're going to have a local hub with various things going on, you might need something still local. But just coming back to your first point, in terms of perceptions of risk around tenants, because I think one of we had Jeremy Moody from the certified I can't remember what the
Central Association of Agricultural Valuers.
Thank you, Graham. Earlier, and one thing he was talking about was that, of course, the nature of risk is going to change dramatically, or is changing dramatically, in that what in the past was a low risk business model could well in the future be a high risk model. And he was likening the sort of change to what happened in the 80s to industry. So that what we're actually sort of saying to landowners now and land agents is, well, maybe you need to reconsider your risk assessments, and maybe new business models being brought in by new entrants are actually lower risk. Obviously, there's than some of your current tenants who may not be adapting, changing, and their business model actually might turn out to be high risk. And if you're going to hedge your bets, maybe you need more new entrants now than you have in the past to actually reduce your overall portfolio risk profile, if you like. But having said that, we're also recognizing, and I think a lot of people have said this, that, you know, mentors have a role, and it's not an either or. There may be types of expertise that are still very relevant, but also new types of knowledge that are new types of ideas that are also really relevant. And actually putting those together in some sort of way could be the way forward, mix and match. And I think people, the Welsh, was it the Welsh presentation was one of the sort of things there was trying to mix people with different perspectives. Actually, no, someone else maybe. No, the Welsh, I think, wanted to be more exclusive in terms of focusing on people with long-term commitments to the history in the agricultural sector. Can I ask Janine now to come in?
Hello.
Hi, Janine, we can hear you.
Hi. Hi. Yeah. You asked me to come in for a reason, or?
Well, you put your hand up.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to put my hand up. I do apologise.
Oh, sorry. I thought you had something to.
It was supposed to be just to agree with what you're saying.
Oh, right. Sorry. Probably I maybe misread it. My apologies.
No, it's absolutely fine. I'm just agreeing with what you're saying, definitely, because we're in a position where we're young, we're new. We established our farm 10 years ago, but most of our land around us is surrounded by private tenancies, and not many people are actually farming. So for us, local support and trying to get more councils involved in and obviously converting back to share farming and stuff has been a challenge for us over the past 5-6 years, and we've independently done it on our own. So I'm participating in these kind of things because I think it's been a bit of a challenge for us. And although we're based on, I think there's probably about 2,000 hectares of land around us, but a lot of it is obviously being used for animal feed and not growing food. So, and we're just interested because many people we speak to who come to our farm participate in activities, they want to do farming, but they just have no clue how to get there. And we've virtually done it independently on our own type of thing. And we've been engaging with the local authorities to try and encourage more young people, new people into growing and farming, but we're just not quite there yet because there's just no support available.
Brilliant. Oh, well, hopefully people in your position we can help. And obviously you've got quite a young team member there who's providing a lot of input.
So sorry about that. I meant to just say, no, I agree with it. I went to put my hands up. So
no, sorry. It was my fault, probably. No problem. Thanks, Janine. Oh. Oscar, did you want to come back on what I said or add further thoughts?
I didn't really have much of a comeback. I guess my thoughts as you were speaking were, could you encourage multiple mentors so that you that there is that stability in the person that the landowner knows, but that person doesn't then drag the new entrant into an old system of farming. I actually come from quite a unique perspective in the sense that I was offered an opportunity 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and took it. So I took on a 2-year FBT, and my landlord wanted to be my mentor, which doesn't really work.
Right, that's interesting.
Well, I say that's a very off-the-cuff statement. It didn't work in my situation. Obviously, there's a bias, isn't there, from the landlord, and that's not necessarily always helpful. Likewise, I was then given someone who the landlord trusted, which is essentially what I'm now proposing, to help me. And I can see that there were benefits there, although we had two very different opinions on how you should farm. So I was trying to be coerced down that old school route. And that didn't necessarily work. Whereas if I had another person who the landlord trusted, or another person with a lot of respect locally, then I think that would have probably made for a better situation, so that it wasn't just me standing against the people that the landlord put in front of me all the time, because I didn't necessarily agree with how they were trying to coerce me.
It's interesting because actually in general, the sort of mentor-mentee relationship is, I don't think, meant to be one of coercion, is it? And in general, I think the principle is that the mentee chooses their mentor. I mean, obviously the mentor has to volunteer, but the mentor has to suit the mentee rather than vice versa. But it's interesting, you know, if it became a condition, you've got to have this mentor unless you have this, you know, that is, from what you're saying, that's a sort of bit problematic.
It is problematic, but now looking at it from the outside, I can see how it's also beneficial for creating access to the land and to give the landlord some reassurance.
Yeah, so it's more like an assurance rather than a strictly a mentor, etc. But anyway, well, that's fine. I'll ask Graham. Bring Graham in here.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. Sorry I came in late to this. I missed part of the presentation, but in terms of what's proposed, I mean, I'm wondering whether you want to shake things up a bit more than you've mentioned, because in terms of county farms, obviously council farms, there's only about 40 new entrants a year. It's not very much, not many people to work with if you're going to do stuff locally. And I just wonder whether you could bring in and make your incubation units, bring in people from private estates. So you also perhaps bring in younger farmers who are trying to get established, perhaps working on their parents' farm, but lacking the business skills and the training opportunities that they might wish, and actually shake things up quite a lot more than has been mentioned. So bringing private landowners, private estates, to let them have contact with these new entrants, and they might do some of the mentoring as well. So you just shake everything up a bit more and create new opportunities and new networks, because I think that would be really interesting and give you perhaps the critical mass you need to do stuff locally as well as nationally. Otherwise, it's a very small pool to draw from, isn't it? The council farms themselves. And just on the point about the tenants, the sitting tenants that was just mentioned, Oscar mentioned, that's something we were wondering about, and whether you couldn't, as one rationale for people continuing their tenancies on council farms is they take on a mentoring role, and that gives them a reason for perhaps staying on rather than moving elsewhere. Gives them, it's maybe a way of balancing the interests of sitting tenants and new entrants on council estates. But I absolutely agree with you. I think mentees need to choose their mentors because they've got to find someone they want to work with. And last point just to make is I think maybe the relationship goes both ways. Maybe a young person who's got lots of new ideas talking to someone who's established might change their mindset, as well as it works the other way and they learn skills or learn how the land works or learn new, learn to understand farming better from someone who's been in it a long time.
All good ideas. I might just, in terms of the numbers issue, we are trying to look at the numbers, and because obviously, I mean, we need to increase the numbers. The question is, there's a sort of key question, it seems, is to how many people you can fit down the pipeline, if you like, and you don't want to be training and bringing on too many new entrants who then have nowhere to go, if you like. So hence we're trying to think along the whole pipeline and how we can sort of shift people on, hence trying to get people out of council farms onto onto private landowner tenancies, as well as people in. But I think, yes, other interesting comments. Someone, David said in the chat, how do we get private landowners estates together to explain the benefits of creating new entrant tenancies like the one that Yorkshire Water created last year? I didn't know about the Yorkshire Water one, but I'll just say we have now got a group of big institutional landowners, a sort of working group, who are going to develop a set of commitments that they hope to get as many landowners to sign up to, in terms of giving a sort of more even playing field, if you like, for new entrants. So, and one of them could be that they don't automatically just go one-to-one to their own current tenants. They actually open it up and advertise it more, more widely. They could also make a commitment to inform the local hubs that they have that available land and so on. But all this is under development. But actually, David, what did Yorkshire Water do?
I think they it's pretty. It was in a lot of the farming press. Robert, I just don't think what his second name was, but I can certainly find it and put a link in the chat before the end of the session. But really absolutely brilliant example of a big institutional landowner, taking what most people would say is a slightly higher risk than the more established farmer that that has been mentioned, which they could have, like you said, extended the tenancy to one of their existing tenants. It's also, coming back on what you said then, Henry, it's just how do you get, obviously you said about the sort of the big landowners like the National Trust or the Crown or someone like that, but how do you get the sort of more medium, I know you said you can expand expand, you're sort of getting the bigger landlords first, then sort of work down. But like I said, it's a huge task, isn't it? Trying to get as you know, well, like I said, there's a huge number of landowners in the country. How we really get them on board, you know, whether they've got sort of 500 acres or 200 acres or whatever it might be. I think I said it's a real challenge. I'll just grab the link for that Yorkshire Water, and I'll come back on that.
That would be great. Just in terms of how do we expand, we're working with Savills at the moment. They're doing a major survey of land agents, looking at how they see risk, and we're hoping to get a sort of conversation out there that sort of starts land agents who apparently, you know, are part of the conservative response, because it's much easier for a land agent to go with someone they know, you know, a tenant as well, to get them to reconfigure how they manage risk on a portfolio of tenancies effectively in the changing situation. So we are trying to get out there and say, well, actually having new, fresh, different people coming in is probably what things you need, and actually potentially, if not immediately, over at the short to medium term, lowers your risk. But very interesting. Yeah, the Yorkshire Water, that'd be great.
Sarah's just put it in the chat now. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, oh yeah, good. We'll look at that, and hopefully the people, basically Don Curry, Lord Curry, and John Varley are the sort of champions who are with the CLA and various other landowners who are trying to drive and develop some sort of commitment, statement of commitment. By the way, on the issue that Fiona raised about agricultural colleges designing a nationwide program, actually, one of the initiatives that we have in Defra at the moment is some sort of, I'm trying to remember what it's called, TIAH. Catherine, what's the name of this?
TIA.
But, we're just about to talk to them, and you know, they may be the place for some sort of national programs that could be then drawn on by local hubs, networks. Sarah.
I was just going to help you with the name of that, and it's a really it's something that we have talked about, because if you're going to have a central hub, and this central hub's obviously going to do a lot of things in the future, it makes sense to integrate. But also I was going to pick up on the professional advice. We've had subsidised training supported by Defra and run by Savills, and again the training, the introduction to professionals, breaking down barriers, knowledge exchange is so useful, because it creates a network of learning and a confidence. So those are all good points, and it's very encouraging to hear that the matching and mentoring that's been probably mooted now for over 25 years might finally be coming to fruition.
Brilliant. We're just about running out of time. Well, we're just about running out of time. So thank you very much, everyone. We've had a range of questions. I think Emma's presentation, I hope you found that really useful, because it's very useful. I think very useful to know what's happening out there, what other people are doing and so on. But and I think it gives lots of ideas, but it's good to cover a range of other events. And I hope you found that useful. Brilliant. And thanks very much, Emma, for a very swish presentation. I thought really well put together. So thanks, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you next week as well.